God's ever near, the one friend who loves us without any measure. Of his dreams our love was made, only from him is love repaid. Let us in gladness all live for him, serve him in every season, serve him with thought, with hand and limb, love him without any reason. God befriends us as we are, fools we that hold his love afar. God is our Father, our Mother too. God is our dearest treasure. God's ever near, the one friend who loves us without any measure. Of his dreams our love was made, only from him is love repaid. Let us in gladness all live for him, serve him in every season, serve him with thought, with hand and limb, love him without any reason. God befriends us as we are, fools we that hold his love apart. God befriends us as we are, fools we that hold his love apart.
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect song. We would very often, about 5 o'clock, get a phone call. When Swami was in residence, we would get a phone call, and he would say, "Would you like to come down for tea?" And every day, of course, we kept the time slot open. So we would go down, and it was his time to exercise. So his exercise was to go out to the garden and do at least 3 if he could. Sometimes he couldn't make it that many times. Loops around the garden. But he would say, "I'm not doing anything before I have a spot of tea." So in that vein. So
Before we start, I just want to ask a question. Maybe this doesn't apply to anybody, but how many people are here for the first time? Are there any people here for the very first time? Raise your hand. Oh, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. That's nice. It's always nice to have new friends join us. Okay.
So, I think what we're going to do today is just answer questions and schmooze and have a good time. But we thought we would like to begin. For those of you who would like to delve more deeply into the subject of relationships, with Ananda Online, Devi and I did a 10-part series on relationships. So that's available, gives a lot of teaching and in-depth teachings. And then if you don't have time for that, get this book.
Say what it is.
30-Day Essentials for Marriage. And it was written, actually, it says in here that Devi and I had been married for 27 years. So that means it was written 23 years ago. So just 2002, if the math works in my head properly.
He wrote it in case.
I wrote it, yes. So what it is there's a day for each day of the month, or each 1 through 30, 30-day essentials. And there's a little essay. There are photos. Almost all of them are my photos. I did quite a bit of photography when we were in Europe, especially. And then there's a little essay, and then a little exercise, try this. So I'm going to start with day 1, which is...
Before you start, we showed Swami the manuscript before it was published, and he read it. He said, and we had the little essay, and then on the side we said, do this. And Swami said, that's a little pushy. Why don't you just say, try this?
Yeah.
And so...
Which is much
nicer.
Much nicer. So, this, by the way, is a little fountain from Lugano. Swami, when we were in Italy with him, he loved to go to Lugano. Lugano is right on the border of Italy and Switzerland. And especially when we were in Como, it was very close, only half-hour, 45-minute drive. And through the mountains, really lovely. But of all the places that Swami visited, he loved the little shops. It's relatively flat. It's got a beautiful lake and parks and wonderful shops and especially good restaurants. So a perfect, ideal place for Swami to
But also
visit.
Along the lake, there are the beautiful, beautiful tulip beds. And in fact, there's some pictures of it in there. And that's where he got the idea of the tulip garden.
Yeah.
It's in Lugano.
Okay, so day 1, which I put the very most important aspect first, of course. So day 1 is, can you guess? Have fun.
Pirani guessed.
Yeah. So, day 1, have fun. Having fun together is vital for a happy marriage. Every day should include some merriment. Run, dance, joke, do something simply for the joy of it. A joyful mind will help you feel physically and mentally healthy, and joy will make your marriage healthy too. The force of gravity can collapse bridges and buildings. Over time, a relationship can collapse from the pressures of stress, disappointment, and self-involvement. Couples need to counter the force of gravity with the law of levity. You don't want to become like one of those old couples sitting grimly and silently at a restaurant table. They've lost their levity, their ability to have fun. Keep your marriage living and growing by finding new ways to laugh and play together. Start now. Never stop. Try this. Ask each other, what should we do today just for the fun of it?
I wanted to add about Lugano. It's near when Ramesh and Bhagavati go to visit their family, his family in Switzerland. They go to Lugano. I guess it's not too far from where your family lives. And it's so sweet because they always send us photographs of all the places that Swami went. And there was this one little pastry shop, Munger's, that just beautiful. And they sent us a picture of the pastry case, just the same as when Swami would go. Anyway, but there was a restaurant that he especially liked to go to right near the hotel where we would usually stay, and the restaurant was called Il Ticino. The area is Ticino. And anyway, it was beautiful. It had been, like a manor house, beautiful. Then they converted it into a restaurant. It had beautiful wooden paneling on the walls, very elegant, and beautiful oil paintings on the walls. But it was extremely expensive. But we never talked about money when we were with Swami. You just let it, whatever happened. But once we were there with Dharmadas and Nirmala, and behind our table there was a beautiful oil painting of kind of a Victorian woman sitting on a chair, and she was holding a piece of paper in one hand, sort of like this, and she was like this and the other. And then Swami went to the bathroom, and we were talking, and we said, we wonder what the piece of paper is. And Dharmadas said, it's the bill for the rest of it.
And Nirmala said, nothing but summer reruns again.
Okay.
Anyway.
So I'm going to read one too, and it sort of reflects what we talked about yesterday, but it's so nicely put. This is day 10, Evenmindedness. And by the way, before I read, I just want to thank Narayan and Dharma Devi for picking up the banner of crystal clarity. They have done it so beautifully, and it's so essential to Ananda's mission. And they're not only making sure that all of Swami's books are in print and up to date, but every month, I mean, it's kind of a miracle, getting new books out. And just thank you all. Thank you. And I see Michael's here. We're moving the shipping here. Do you come with that?
We're not supposed to recruit from other centers.
No, he does it. Michael does the shipping in LA, but we didn't know, so you're not sure yet. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so day 10, Evenmindedness. Evenmindedness is one of the most important attitudes you can develop, not only for marriage, but also for life in general. Emotions are like waves, rising and crashing. Don't let emotional storms toss you around. It is hard on you and hard on your partner. Feelings, even when communicated only in subtle ways, create an emotional environment in which your marriage must live. If you allow moods to run wild, they will give your loved one a case of emotional whiplash. To develop even-mindedness, simply accept conditions and people just as they are. Take a longer view of life and its challenges. Realize that emotional outbursts have the power to destroy a relationship. Calm their destructive storms with the sunshine of even-mindedness. The key to happiness is always to be even-minded and cheerful. And then try this. Watch carefully your emotional reactions to events. As soon as you observe an unwanted reaction, resolve to be even-minded and cheerful in all circumstances. So that's good advice for everything in life.
Now, did you read that because you think I'm not even-minded and cheerful?
You decide for yourself, dear. Okay, so we have one question that was submitted already online, but we really do want you to ask questions, and they can be about anything, really. They can be about the spiritual path, they can be about Swami, our time, travels, service with Swami, they can be about our marriage and our life, or just nothing political, though. We don't,
Yeah.
we don't want to answer questions about politics.
Our son went to a Thanksgiving kind of fest with a bunch of his friends, and they had a rule. They had a big bowl in the middle of the table with questions that were kind of semi-personal, like what was your happiest time, what was your most difficult time, things like that. Anybody who talked about anything political had to reach in and pull a question out and then talk about it in front of everybody. So, no politics.
Okay, should I read this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a nice question, and I think we can all relate to it. How should we continue our relationships with those who have passed on before us? More pointedly, does reminiscing about our relationship in life with them hold them to this lifetime, keeping them from moving on with their soul's evolution? we've all had loved ones or friends who have passed on. But as with everything, it depends how it's done, the consciousness with which it's done, I should say. Because, we read in the autobiography the little deer with Master at Ranchi, and how the students overfed it, and it died, and Master prayed, please let the deer live. And then the little soul of the deer came to him and said, let me go, I need to evolve. So that's, if we're trying to hold the memory of a loved one, to hold it freeze it in time, that's not helpful for you or for the other person, but the other soul. But, we've had many dear loved ones who have passed away, and relatives as well. And the one that comes to mind is Ananda, who was Bharat sitting here. And she was probably one of the closest friends I've had in this life. I think about her all the time, but with joy. Just, oh, thank you, Ananda. That was such a fun time we had together. Not trying to say, oh, I miss you, I need you, I'm lonely without you, but just thank you. And I think that's a mutual exchange, I'm sure you feel it too. You feel it with her with you, but joyfully, just kind of keeping an eye, making sure everything's okay. But just so, no, it's lovely to add our love and our blessings and our support to ones who have passed away. And I know my mother died some years ago, and that was a hard loss for me because she was a very, very sweet soul, very loving, pure-hearted soul. She would never, as growing up, she would never let us say, I hate this. She said, no, don't use that word. It's such a harsh word. Just say you don't care for it. And if we would come home from school and maybe somebody had made us cry, teased us or said something not nice, whatever it was. And so we'd come home and maybe you'd be crying and my mom would say, well, what's wrong? And I would tell her, and instead of getting all irate, I'm going to call that girl's parents or, to tell her parents what she did to you, my mom would say, let's sit down. Let's try to understand that person. And that has been formative in my life. Whenever there isn't harmony with someone, I try to understand them. Why would they act that way? And so when my mother passed, it was a time of loss, and I missed her. And then and there were times, and maybe you've all had this experience too, where I would just think of her and start crying. This went on for actually a few years. And then one day we were having a meditation. It was a Kriyaban retreat with Swamiji. We were meditating out in the amphitheater. And it was a beautiful dawn morning meditation outside. And I just started thinking of her, and the tears came to my eyes. And then I just heard her voice saying, honey, you don't need to grieve about me anymore. I'm just fine. And from that moment on, there was no sadness. And so to remember with love, with joy, with gratitude, all that's wonderful, but not to try to cling. That holds you back, it holds them back. So,
yeah, a lot of times the best answers are kind of higher common sense. So how do we relate to somebody who's passed on? How would you like to be related to if you were passed on? If somebody sent thoughts, let's imagine getting an email because it's more solid. You get an email that says, I really appreciate the way that you were with me, and it was such a joy. That's very different from getting an email that says, I'm having so much trouble, and why aren't you here to help me? And, so relate to them in a higher sense. Sending appreciation is wonderful. And they'll receive it. The exchange of love doesn't have any boundaries. In fact, the whole sense of boundaries is false. right now, Master isn't somewhere there. He's right in this room. And vibrationally, and as is all of our loved ones, they're right in this room, just at a different wavelength, vibrational wavelength. And so they aren't far away. I have to break. It reminds me of a joke. Part of our question and answer sessions is telling jokes. So this man goes in, he's visiting Europe, and he goes in, and in St. Peter's, in the Vatican, he sees a red telephone on the wall, and it says, direct line to God, 10,000 euros. And he thinks, oh, that's a lot of money. I mean, it'd be interesting to see if it's a direct line to God, but I'm not going to risk 10,000 euros on whether it is or not. Then he forgets about it. He's traveling around, and he is visiting a little church in Ireland. And there's a big red telephone, says direct line to God, 25 cents. And he goes, the priest is there. You'll enjoy this, Brian. Brian's Irish. There's a priest there, and he goes up and he says, in the Vatican, there was a phone like that. It said 10,000 euros. This says 25 cents. Why is it 25 cents here and so much money there? And the priest says, aye, but from here it's a local call.
Jyotish, while you're on the jokes, tell the one about, not with that sense of urgency.
What?
The joke about not with mañana.
Yeah, this was told to us by an Irish friend. So there's the Spanish ambassador is visiting Ireland, and the Spanish ambassador and the Irish ambassador are touring the country. And after they've become friends, and after a couple of days, the Spanish ambassador says, you know, in Spain we have this word, mañana. It means, don't be too worried about it. We can do it tomorrow. Do you have anything like that in Ireland? And the Irish ambassador pauses a little bit, says, no, not with the same sense of urgency. Okay, now how do we come back to this? So the local call to your loved ones is, in fact, a local call. But treat them the way that you would like to be treated, with love and respect. The other part of it, and Devi touched on this, but the other part of it is, what is the effect on us of holding on to our loved ones? There's a positive aspect to it, but there's a negative aspect. Among the meannesses of the heart, Sri Yukteswar in his treatise,
Holy Science,
talks about the meannesses of the heart, and he lists them. Things like jealousy, anger, pride of pedigree, and so on. But he lists also in there grief. And you think, that doesn't seem to fit in there. But a friend of ours wrote a book on it and was giving a talk, and he said something very wise. He said there are two kinds of grief. There's an emotional grief, and that's what Devi was experiencing. You know, that something would happen and just an emotion would rise in the heart, and there was a little bit of grief there. Or Master experienced grief for quite a long time after his mother died. That's emotional grief. And that has its own time and its own place. You know, if we don't grieve, then sometimes we stuff those emotions, and that can become very unhealthy. So there's emotional grief, and that can be a positive thing to allow to happen. But then, as this man giving the class said, then there's intellectual grief, which is like the mental habit of remembering the time that you felt some way. And if you hold on to that, the memory of something, the mental memory of some negative emotion, it is the wrong use of memory. Master said we should not use the God-given power of memory to remember negative things. And so remembering something negative intellectually shrinks the heart and is, one of the meannesses of the heart. So coming back to this subject, so there's a proper way to remember, relate to, think about those close ones who have passed. And there are ways that would not only not be helpful to them, but hurtful to us.
And kind of a tangent on this topic, I think many people in the world have gone through a separation, either through divorce or a friendship where you part ways, with not positive emotions, the friendship ends. And how do you deal with that going into the future? And you don't want to just pretend like it didn't happen, because that's subconsciously it's still there. But Master talked about how to end a marriage if there really are obstacles that can't be overcome. And that's just to consciously say, we tried to make this work, and now to release it. But if this is something that happened, in your past, where you have a memory of a unhappy ending of a relationship, try again. Don't try to deny it, but don't dwell, as he was saying, Jyotish was saying, holding on to the negative emotions. Just bless that person, release that person. We had this karma together. That karma was over, and I let it go now. And so everything in our life that remains unresolved, we have to come back, and honestly, it has to be resolved sometime or other. And so why not do it in this lifetime? And just think of the person, friend, partner, whatever it is, and just say, we tried our best. We probably both made mistakes, and I let you go. And with blessing and freedom. And that's, for devotees, it's really important not to leave any stone unturned of suppressed karma, suppressed feelings, but just to walk forward in freedom. And so it's important to remember, because few people in this day and age go through life without some separation of some kind or another. Okay.
And the same applies to yourself. We've all made mistakes in the past. If we hold on to those mistakes, what good does it do us? Say, well, so I was stupid when I did that. I'm going to try to be better. But holding on to negative things in the past retards our progress toward the light. Okay,
there's one.
Yep.
Here's a little. We're always reluctant to tell this joke because I hope it doesn't offend anybody. But there was this older couple, and they're, as you get older, you say an older couple used to be in their 60s. Now, this older couple in their 90s, and they go to a lawyer and they say, we want to get divorced, and the lawyer looks at them and he said, well, I'm happy to do this for you, but why have you waited this long before you decided to get divorced? And the woman looks at the lawyer and she said, well, you see, sir, we wanted to wait until the children died. And if that offends anybody, write to the expanding light. What kind of programs are you putting on here? Okay.
This was one of Swami's favorite jokes. So this elderly man is dying and his children are there. And coming up from downstairs is this wonderful, wonderful aroma of his favorite chocolate chip cookies. And he says to the son, oh, your mom is making my favorite cookies. Can you go down and bring me a plate of them? So the son comes up with a plate, and he's about to offer it to the old man, and the old man gets one, and the wife comes in, slaps his hand, and says, "Those are for the funeral."
Okay,
let's
question.
try to move on here.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, lots. Oh, thank you all for asking questions. Let's start with Ramesh. We'll just move our way across the room.
I have a question, but another one came to mind, so I hope I can ask. One is very short.
Two.
I've been wondering how much time Jyotish spends educating himself about new jokes.
Well, I'll tell you a secret. I probably shouldn't share this, but I'm going to anyway. About 8 or 10 years ago, I was, I don't even know what started it, but I was following a thread from an email that somebody had sent, and they said that, go to this website and check this out. And so I did. And then came up an ad like you get on, I don't know whether it was YouTube, I don't think it was, but there was an ad for something called Quora. Now, Quora is a site where anybody can ask any kind of question by interest, and then you get an answer from somebody who's done a lot of research. So it's like a forum, quorum, that's answered by people who are really into something. And what caught my eye was something about the Battle of Hastings. Some question about the Battle of...
He is answering your question.
Yeah, I'm getting there. So something about the Battle of Hastings. Battle of Hastings, for those of you who may not know, is the battle where William the Conqueror came from France, from Normandy, and came across, and that was the battle with the English in which he conquered England. And so I was interested in that because it had to do with master. And so I got in, I followed that. And because I had interest in that, I started getting feeds from Quora about medieval warfare. Now, the part I shouldn't share is I know way, way more about medieval warfare than anybody in my position should. Because they keep feeding me. But they also keep feeding jokes.
Jyotish, what is your position? Sitting?
Sitting? At this moment.
No,
yes.
no, but you said anybody in my position should know.
Exactly.
So somebody's...
I know what you said.
So, go on, so you know...
Anyway, so they also feed jokes, but honestly about 90% of them are not available to be told, and so I have to edit them out quite rapidly, bail out of them before the punchline. But that's where I get most of my joke material. That and sharing, and I'll tell us, some people say, "Oh, I can never remember a joke." The way to remember a joke is tell it 2 or 3 times, and then it sticks in your mind, and then when the occasion is right, if you've got an Irishman sitting in the audience, then you tell a couple of Irish jokes, but you've got to have told them before. So that's the answer to that one.
So my real question was, in the AY, Master says that the householder path can be the higher path, provided there are certain conditions in place. And I was wondering if you could talk and elaborate a little bit about these conditions.
What I believe the quote is, I'm just paraphrasing, provided it's done with detachment and non-identification with the role. And, that's why Lahiri Mahashaya is one of our line of gurus. Sri Yukteswar was married, we know, and had a daughter, but that wasn't central to his life, where Lahiri, had, I think, 4 children, and worked in the world and served, and so he was the model where you play your role, but you don't identify with, I am a householder, you're just a yogi, playing a certain role in life, and you're not attached to that role or to the things in your life. There's that magnificent story which we've shared. Well, you want to tell it about Lahiri and his daughter?
Yeah. Just to preface it, I'll tell the story, but to preface it, so what we're here for is to work through any barriers that keep us from knowing God. And so if there are desires to have a partner, it's much better to have a life with a partner than to suppress that. But equally true for you fellows sitting here in yellow, if you have a leaning toward being a monk or a nun, then follow that. The outward aspect is much less important than the desire to give your life completely and wholeheartedly to God. And so as we talked yesterday, but to reiterate, being married can be a part of that pathway. And as Lahiri, or Master quoting in here, to do your duty without attachment is the higher form. He also told the kind of story about this young man comes and says, I lost my job, my wife left me, my children won't talk to me anymore, I think I want to become a renunciate. And he says, Master says, you don't have anything left to renounce. It has all renounced you. And so now coming back to the story that Devi asked. So Lahiri was, as we all know now, because it's come out more in history and Master writing about him and so on, we know of his stature as being a high yogi. But in Benares of his day, that wasn't widely known, and it wasn't even known among his own family. One time, one of his nephews was quite ill and saying, I've gone to this doctor and that doctor, and he was talking to somebody, and this person said, well, why don't you go to your uncle? And he said, why should I go to my uncle? He said, he can cure anything. He's a great yogi. Oh, really? Maybe I'll do that. His own nephew. So Lahiri did not lead with the fact of his spirituality, but he was a great magnet for those who came. Every night he would sit in not a very big room in his bedroom, probably might have held 15 people or so. He would sit every night and give what he called his Gita discourses. And so this happened. The story will involve that. But he had, I think, 3 daughters, 2 sons and 3 daughters, I think is correct. In any case, one of them became quite deathly ill. She was married at this time, and as is the custom in India, living with the family of her husband. And so the wife went to visit and said, she's just very ill and the doctors don't know what to do. Can't you do something to help your daughter? And he said, go and take some oil and take it to her. And
take it from a lamp.
Yeah, take it from a lamp. Take a little oil and then go and put 3 drops on her lips and she'll be okay. So the wife went. But the family was into Western medicine. They thought this was just kind of superstition. And so they refused to allow her to do that. And the daughter died. So now the day of the daughter's death, Lahiri is sitting there with his disciples about ready to give the Gita discourse. And one of the disciples says, oh, Master, you don't need to do it tonight. You must be grieving. And Lahiri said, no, let's go ahead and have our Gita discourse. And then another disciple said, well, frankly, we're so upset at the death of your daughter, I don't think we can pay attention. And Lahiri said, well, in that case, then let's not have our discourse tonight. And then as one of the disciples was leaving, he said, Master, aren't you grieving at all? Aren't you affected by the loss of your own daughter? And Lahiri said, you need to understand something. He said, your minds are like soft clay. They receive a blow and it leaves an impression in that soft clay. My mind is like marble. I've received a blow much heavier than the blow that you've received, but it does not leave an impression in my mind. And so that's a kind of a answer of how do we, is the householder path higher or not? It is if it's your dharma, and if you can do so by working toward getting your mind more like marble and less like clay.
Okay, so Lakshman, now he's already got the mic going.
Yeah, he's got the mic. By the way, obviously we've got a 2-for-1 sale going on.
Like probably everybody, I was very touched by the story of Swamiji having arranged your marriage. And I've been interested in my connections with Indians over the years to see how many young Indians, even in this day and age, are interested in having their marriages arranged to one extent or another. So my questions, I guess there are a few, is how many arranged marriages are there among devotee, Ananda community members, say in America? And do you have any advice for people, whether or not they should be considering that, if there are very few, whether there should be more in light of Swamiji's comment on it?
Thank you, Lakshman. There aren't very many as far as I know. In India it's different because even with the devotees, there are more arranged marriages through the families. But in, I believe it's the guidelines for the Sevaka order, I believe it's that. Swami said that if you're considering entering into a relationship with someone, you should consult a spiritual leader in your community. And I think that's very good advice. Sometimes people come and they're already involved and they, what do you think? And what are you going to say? No, don't do it. They've already taken the plunge. But if you're considering it, even if it's simply to create a little bit of objectivity, it's good to ask someone who you respect spiritually, do you think this is a good idea? And to give it time, that's the most important thing. Emotions, just like we read that thing about Evenmindedness, emotions can take over in your life. And in the beginning of a relationship, if it's based really on emotional, we're so much in love, you just know there will inevitably be a trough. But if you can kind of just step back and at least take the time to have other people who you respect consider, do you think this would be good for me? And it's not like it's an arranged marriage, but at least it's a conscious step, not just something. But having said that, I do want to say that there are many, many young couples living at Ananda now who have come together in the last, 5 years, more or less. And we're very proud of you. You get it. You're doing a wonderful job. And I won't name names here, but I haven't seen any couples come together at Ananda where I thought, oh, that's really a big mistake. I haven't seen it. I really think those of you who have moved forward have chosen wisely. And I just want to thank you for that. But it is good to consult with somebody you respect and to, if nothing else, just to get their support. So anyway, it's not really an arranged marriage, but it's a guided direction
An
in
approved
life.
marriage. You know, there's also a cultural aspect, Lakshman, that those cultures that are trying to hold on to a cultural identity are much more likely to try to have not only arranged marriages, but a whole ecosystem that supports that, you know. So there'll be yentas in the Jewish system, and I don't know what, there'll be names for them, but there's a whole, believe me, a whole ecosystem of finding a partner for Indians. You know, there are websites, and within India, you not only have to marry within Indians, generally within an Indian arrangement, but the 4 castes. You've got to marry within your caste, and sometimes you have to marry within a district. And so there's a whole, where there are more cultural expectations or restrictions, then the systems get set up to support that. On the other hand, in America, it's such a melting pot that we don't have that same kind of system, generally speaking, and therefore people get together primarily according to attraction, and that can be positive or negative. That's why Swami said, you know, there are problems both ways, but generally speaking, marriages that are arranged by somebody really looking at the long-term benefit of 2 people coming together, setting aside what I was saying about culture, you know, all of that, but a person who's arranging to bring 2 people together is really looking at their compatibility and a lot of factors in it. Whereas just attraction, as Swami said, as Master said, a nice bow tie marrying a pretty shade of lipstick, you know, that is less likely to result. But
fortunately, at Ananda, very few people wear bow ties or lipstick.
Right. But coming back to Ananda, since Devi touched on it, we too have a culture. And generally speaking, if somebody comes to Devi and me for advice, the first thing we'll tell them, if they want to find a partner, the first thing we'll tell them is be sure, if you can, to find a partner who respects your, and if possible, shares your spiritual aspirations. Because if you don't have that, for a true deep devotee, there's inevitably going to be some conflict. Now, couples that are already married, we say as long as the partner is supportive of your spiritual life, then don't seek a divorce. But if the partner is actively trying to suppress a person's spiritual life, then as Ananda Ma said, when a higher duty conflicts with the lower duty, so a higher duty, our duty to find God, conflicts with the lower duty, the duty to follow your vow of marriage, when those two conflict, the lower duty ceases to exist. And so it's a very fluid and complex thing, but I think the thing to really keep in mind is not so much personality and even lifestyle. It's the soul's evolution and the soul's need to try to reach up toward God. And a marriage can be very helpful to that, or a marriage that is not a good marriage can be a detriment to that. But coming back to your original question, the householder path, if followed with that ascending arc toward finding God and doing your duty with non-attachment, is the better path.
we had a friend when we were living in the San Francisco ashram who was a very sincere devotee, but he would come to many activities, but his wife wasn't at all interested. And one day he came to talk with us, and he was having some problems because she was jealous of the time he spent in meditation, a little bit threatened by it. And one day she came up to him and said, "Who do you love more, me or God?" And he very wisely said and resolved the problem. He said, "Because I love God, I can love you more." And which was a very good answer. Yeah. And she accepted that. Okay, so
okay. Oh, there's
Sunny and Josette.
So how do you both reconcile complete renunciation to God with your responsibility to each other as a couple? That's question one.
Yeah.
Complete renunciation with
to God, right? So
well, you see God in the other person.
Yeah.
You're serving God.
Yeah, there really isn't a conflict at all. You know, in life, everything that you're trying to do needs energy. And your relationship to God needs energy. If you're in a partnership, your relationship to your partner needs energy. But they don't have to be in conflict. They're just different ways of giving energy, appropriate energy, to whatever you're trying to grow and uplift. So, yeah. But I will say that, and this is a danger for people in this community and other Ananda communities, we are so busy and so sometimes busy serving that we don't give enough energy to our relationship. And so the relationship itself should be seen as part of our service, not in the sense that it's a grim duty, but in the sense that it's a responsibility of our spiritual path. And so it, that's why we started out with the reading, have fun. Do something together just to have fun together, because that brings God's joy into your life. But the two aren't mutually exclusive.
And, we're both working on books now. Jyotish his book is about the heart of service. And, we try to think about God as much as possible, but how often in the day are we thinking about what we need to do and da-da-da-da-da. And, but service is something that's always at hand. And what is the heart of service? Giving of yourself to help another, or to have devotion to God. And so service is a beautiful form of renunciation. And one of the things that I'm coming to appreciate is the importance of unseen or unrecognized service. So it's very nice to say, "Oh, I made you a nice dinner tonight," but it's more fulfilling if you do something that the person doesn't really notice, but is enjoying. That's a very nice feeling. And so just unseen acts of service, unseen acts of love. But it's all about, the path of renunciation is about ego transcendence. And it doesn't matter what your circumstances are. You can, be running, a factory, but if it's all about ego transcendence, then that's a life of renunciation. And so whatever we do, people can be walking walking down a path, two different people walking a path that looks very, very similar from the outside, but from the inside, it's bringing them to freedom and or to bondage. And so it's really about ego transcendence of the little self. And I found something fascinating recently. What I love about the spiritual teachings is you can have studied them and read them and listened to them and repeated them for 50 years, and then you always are finding something new. And I was looking in the Divine Romance, and at the very, I don't know why I was doing this, but at the very back, I was looking at the glossary, how they, define different words. And there was the word ego, and I thought, I wonder how they define ego. And so what they said, I shared this at lunch with some friends yesterday, it said ego, the Sanskrit word for it is ahankara, and the literal meaning is I do. And so it's the sense of I am the doer. That's the root of ego. And that's why, the great ones stress over and over, God is the doer, God is the doer. But as long as you think I am the doer, that's affirming ego. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. And even I'm trying to apply it to my meditation, because I'm going to meditate now. And you think that's a really good thing, to be disciplined in your meditation and use your willpower. But then if you think I am meditating, that's a barrier. But if you just think God's meditating with me, through me, in me, then that's very freeing. And so renunciation is to get the thought out of your mind, I am the doer. And if it's in serving another human being, if it's in doing, your job and taking care of other people with compassion and empathy, which I know you do, just said, and then that's ego transcendence. It doesn't matter what your outward role is. Okay, Sunny had a question.
One, I was just curious to know how both your worldly on-earth families accepted your marriage, and and did yours, Devi, accept Jyotish and vice versa? And then number two is, what was the hardest thing that you can look at and say, well, the big thing that we had to overcome was?
Okay, well, I had been at Ananda for almost 7 years before we got married. So that was the hardest thing for them, me coming to Ananda. After that, it was like, whatever she does is going to be weird. I remember one time I went to visit my parents, and my father had passed away. And she said, I cut an article out of a newspaper for you. It's about cults. That's what you are, aren't you? You're a cult? And I said, well, not exactly, Mom. But I remember my family was Jewish. And so when I called my mother and said, Mom, I'm going to get married, there's a long pause, and she said, he's not Jewish, is he? I said, no. And she said, well, what is he? And I didn't really, she was asking, what he had been. He was a yogi. And I said, I don't really know. It's some Christian sect or something. I don't know. Anyway, but then when she met him, it was because, as I said, she was quite a sensitive, spiritual soul. And when she met him, I could tell she had never met anybody like him in her life. She was like, she was just kind of in awe of him. And he was just himself, but there was that deep centeredness and inner joy and presence and kindness. And I knew she was very pleased, very, very pleased. But it took a while.
I was really fortunate with my birth family, or my birth parents. They were very, very progressive. My father he'd graduated from Yale. He was an architect, and then he went to, at that time there was almost like a graduate school for art called Cranbrook. And the best artists, best architects, best glass blowers, best painters would go there and teach. And so he went there, and he and my mother were relatively recently married, and he went to study with some very well-known architects, high-level architects. And he said, well, what are you going to study, to my mother? And she said, well, I wasn't planning to study anything. She said, you can't just sit on your hands. You've got to do your thing too. So she studied weaving. She had always been very facile with her hands and with yarn. And she ended up winning some international competitions in weaving. But having said that, they were the kind of couple that always empowered equality, new innovative ideas. And so me coming to Ananda was quite simple for them. They were happy to see me trying out an experiment. There's a kind of a fun story. Many of you know that at the beginning of Ananda, we were really needing to have anything business that could pay wages. So I started an incense and then oils business. Haridas, along with Benai, started a little jewelry business. And those were the two main businesses that employed people at the time. But the incense business was growing large enough so that it needed its own space to have a space to do something. So I wrote my parents and said, can I borrow $500 because I need to build a building for an incense shop? And they sent a check along with a note. My father said, for $500, the only thing you can do is dig a hole in the ground and cover it with a blanket. Being an architect. So being the kind of person I was, I took that on as a challenge. So we took boards and we bent them around in a shape with rebar in the ground. So we created a half arc. And by laminating boards together, we'd glue them and then screw them together and laminate it until we had about a 4 or 5 inch thick half arc. And we, I don't know, created 20 or so of those. And then we joined them together with a ridgepole and then covered that with plastic. And so the only cost, we had a cement floor. It's down basically where the yellow building is, down by the market.
That's where it was.
Yeah, that's where it was. So then we covered it with plastic, and it was like a greenhouse in the winter, heated up, and in the summer you could roll up the plastic, and it was ventilated. And so I created that and then took a photograph and sent a picture to my dad. And he had the best laugh about how he got outsmarted by his son architecturally. But I say all of that partly for entertainment value, but partly to say that for them, me coming to Ananda was very just, they accepted it easily and were very happy to see me find a beautiful wife.
And I remember the first time his mother was quite a force of nature. And the first time we went to visit, she was an avid gardener too. And so she said, oh, hello, why don't you come on and help me in the garden? And it just blended right in. It's a great question, Sonny, what's the hardest thing? Because in a way, I can't even remember because you just keep moving on. But I think I could say the hardest thing was adjusting and embracing each other's natures, because Jyotish is very impersonal and I'm much more interactive and personal. And it took us a while to blend that, and that's the beauty of meditation, where you can, if you're having problems in a relationship, if you can meditate together, over time they get resolved because you understand the other person. They're not being cold, they're not being indifferent, they're just happy to be in themselves and be quiet. It took me a while to get that. And I think for Jyotish, it probably took him a while for me to calm down and just say, oh, she's happy. I can let her be in her space too. So learning about each other's natures, adapting to them, I would say that was the hardest thing. I can't think of.
Yeah, I would say, people bring different natures, and there needs to be acceptance of the other person's nature without feeling like they have to change in order to please you. One thing, Devi is faster paced and much more reactive than I am. And along with wanting more interaction, and I'm more impersonal. But I'm also calmer and less reactive. It's a little bit like Teflon and Velcro trying to relate to each other. And if you're going to have a harmonious relationship, you just have to accept the other person as they are, and work within it. But nonetheless, it takes an adjustment, and that's one of the reasons why a close partnership is good, because Swami described community being like a rock tumbler. You put, these rough stones in there, and they get tumbled around, and the grit that you put in a rock tumbler ends up polishing them, and a relationship does that too. So I think the answer for both of us, the difficulties come in accepting, in fact, this is general, the difficulties in relationships come because you don't accept the other person as they are.
And also, as we were talking about yesterday, we had many adventures, and they weren't easy. The winter, and the first winter in Assisi, and the fire, and the lawsuit, and and that going through those things together, where you're both standing on your feet. It's like, okay, we can do this. That's a tremendously bonding experience. So don't be afraid of whatever may lie ahead, and just to say, without naming names, some of our dear friends have gone through severe health challenges, and to go through that together, that's a very bonding experience, and you all know that. And, so marriages and friendships, and parenting, and they're built on facing life's challenges together. And the reason, we said the biggest problem we faced, but the reason it wasn't such a big deal is because we were never that focused on our relationship. We were focused on serving God. And so, okay, we're not getting along so well, but we have a lot of work to do, So it just kind of got washed a little bit aside. Okay, other questions?
Okay, and she has the mic already.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Kanta.
Hi.
So the next one will be Janaka over here, Suditi.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't have a question and answer session without Janaka having a chance at the mic. But
I'm just curious how old you each were when you got here. And then my second question is if you could speak a little more about seeing the God in each other or in everyone, especially when faced with adversity or a difficult personality. And so what exactly that means and how that comes through for you.
Okay.
Okay, well, how old?
When we came.
When we came, yes. I was born in 1943. And so I met Swami in 1967. So I was 23 at the time because I hadn't yet had my 24th birthday. And then, so that was 67. We came here in 1969. Swami and I both moved from San Francisco. So I was 25 at the time that I moved to Ananda.
And I came to Ananda when I was 22, and then I was, when we married in 75, so I was 29 and you were?
33.
Mm-hmm. So we were relatively seasoned. And how to see God in the other person? Well, first you have to experience God within yourself. That's where it all starts. Every happiness in marriage, success in parenting, success in our business and service, and being creative and in the arts, being a wonderful computer and analyst who can unravel incredible things. My eyes going to Vayu. Vayu is one of these behind-the-scene guys who does all the work that makes everything run beautifully. Vayu, can I embarrass you? Just stand, because people don't know. He just redid the whole Kriya website so that people can enter, and it's something like the number of people going on now is like 4 times as high.
Or 10 times as high.
Yeah, 10 times as high. It's just amazing. Just amazing. People asking questions and all that. Anyway, anything that we do to succeed, it has to start with feeling God's presence within you. And the more you feel that, the more you see, like Master looked at some of his disciples and said, if you only knew how beautiful you are, I see you all as beings of light. Well, that's because he was filled with light. So if you look at the world around you and you see only, darkness and despair, that's because you haven't developed the light enough within you. And looking at the world around us now, we have a job ahead of us. Someone sent me, I guess it was Lakshman, you sent us that quote, was it from Master and from Sister Gyanamata, where Master made gave a talk right as World War II was beginning, and he said the disharmony and the negative energy in the world affects devotees even more because they're more sensitive. And so we don't want to talk politics, but we can't ignore the fact that there is much, much darkness in the world right now, and we have to strengthen the light within us. And in doing that, then that light is projected out into our relationships, into everything. But it all starts with personal experience of God through God's grace, through our sincere efforts, and by, living the life of a devotee. We spoke yesterday, the tulip gardens. It's not about the gardens. It's about letting people come and bathe in light. And so many people, I go down there to the Hermitage almost every day when I can to write, and Brian O'Rourke has been out there and just sanding down benches where the wood is peeled and the paint is coming off, and it's like creating a Garden of Eden, really, where people can come. But to see God in the other person, you have to try. You have to see past, feel the God within you, and then see past the fluctuations of ego, and just to see the consistency of God's presence.
But why don't you both stand?
Yes.
Because...
Surya and Vayu.
Yeah, Surya. Yeah. Because not only are they wonderful members, but they have a beautiful family.
Yes.
And they're raising, since this is really about relationships and community includes family, and they're a shining example of that. It's really beautiful to see.
And their children are trilingual, at least.
Yeah. or at least trilingual.
Yeah.
Because he's an original Spanish speaker, you're original Dutch speaker, and then English, and then they lived also in Canada, French-speaking Canada. So,
And in Italy.
Yeah, and in Italy. And so the kids, I realized when speaking of kids growing up and knowing multiple languages, I realized the first year I was in Italy that I saw a man walking his dog. I realized that the dog knew Italian better than I did.
Yeah, because he was saying, vieni,
Yeah.
vieni, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. And the dog knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, right. So anyway, it's beautiful.
Okay, so Janaka has the mic.
So I hope this is a helpful question. So Master says that men tend to be more logic-based and women tend to be based in a feeling. And as Jyotish said yesterday, how do you navigate that when your little discussions come up? Because that could cause a lot of disconnect. And how do you meet the other person?
You know what Master actually said was, in men, reason is foremost, feeling is hidden. In women, feeling is foremost, reason is hidden. And over time, as a couple living the spiritual path, you'll find that. You'll find that the feeling of the man come out more and the kind of objectivity of the woman comes out more. But just to accept that getting to know each other and getting to know how each other will react to something, it saves a lot of time and a lot of effort, kind of misplaced energy. And just to, marriage is a learning experience. And if you go through rough times, just be committed to getting through them, because you will. It's inevitable. But the beauty is that you learn to see the God in the other person. You learn to know what's really going on in the other person, and you can anticipate the other person's reaction, and mold your behavior in such a way that it doesn't get way out of balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. Part of a healthy relationship is that you have to see behind the surface. And so sometimes what a logical person will view as an emotional response, if they look behind that, it's a request for something. Maybe a request for more love, more attention, more, and it might be put as a reaction. And I'll give a hint to the fellows in the audience that if you try to answer an emotional plea with logic, does not work.
One time, it was the first year of our marriage, and something had happened. I don't remember what it was. And I was upset, and I woke up in the night, and I went into the living room, and I was just crying. And then Jyotish just kept sleeping. And then in the morning, I said, "Didn't you hear me crying?" He said, "Yeah, but I kind of thought you needed to be alone."
You needed space.
So you learn.
But you just, you gradually learn. Some people are denser than other people, but you gradually learn. And
I think many of you have heard this, but yes, Swami arranged our marriage, but it kind of was put into motion the first week we were at Ananda, where this wonderful devotee Ma, Haripriya of Ananda, my Ma, came up to me and said, "You're going to marry Jyotish." That was the first week I was here, and I didn't know who she was, and I barely knew who he was. So anyway, but that must have planted some seed or something. And then fast forward 30 years later, Swami had asked us to come to Los Angeles to help him do some things there. We were living there for 9 months with other friends. And Haripriya so we were in Los Angeles, and Haripriya came to visit Swami. She was very, very dear friend. They were like brother, sister. And we were talking with her, and I don't know, the subject came up, which one of us would leave the body first. And Haripriya got very still, and she said, I see you both going into the light together. And then Jyotish said,
well, that probably means that Devi will be driving on the LA freeway.
which I have never done. But someday.
Ergo, we have not gone into the light together yet.
But the driving on the LA freeways can be actually quite a transcendental experience. Narayan has written a beautiful poem about driving on the LA freeway, which you should publish sometime.
On the 110 or something.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Surya.
Surya, okay.
I just recently heard a talk by Swamiji speaking about respect being even more important than love. And I think many people have different ideas of what respect even means. And so I wanted to ask you to speak a little bit about what is true respect.
Oh, that's a nice question.
Now, I'll come back to what it means in my estimation, but why would it be more important than love? Because love often can be selfishly expressed, whereas respect rarely can be expressed in a selfish way.
Good.
And so that's why. So respect, I would say, is twofold. One is to try to see the highest in the other person. And in everything, we should ultimately try to see God behind the form. But you can't always look at another person, especially when there's a discussion going on, and see that it's God who is trying to correct you at that moment. So, yes, we should try to see God, but try to see the highest qualities in the other person. Swami said it was difficult living with Master because he treated you as if you were a saint and related to you in that way. And you had to try to come up to that level. But we should, with each other, try to see the highest in them. The other part of respect is to respect the person for who they are at the time. So maybe they aren't expressing God. Haridas had a great line. Haridas is a font of one-liners. So Haridas and another man, Vijay, who you may or may not know, they started an ashram together.
Swami asked them to.
Yeah, Swami asked them to. Ananda's very first ashram in Sacramento, a little 2-bedroom house, I think. Anyway, later on, Swami Haridas said, yes, Sacramento. That was the time when I learned that there could be 2 God's wills. And so in a marriage, part of respect is to respect that there can be 2 God's wills, because God is equally in 2 different people and is expressing through each of them appropriately to the expression from that person. And so respect is to respect the right of another person to have their own opinions and their own feelings. Swami even has put it in to the vows of marriage that he wrote.
Respect the right to see truth as you perceive it. I think respect also is a byproduct or an outcome of inner detachment. Because as long as you think this person belongs to me, my husband, my child, my pet, whatever it is, there's some desire to own them, to make them be the way you want them to be. But when there's inner detachment, you can just kind of stand back and appreciate it for that person for who they are, not because you own them or they belong to you and you should be a certain way. We learned this so much from being around Swamiji, where he was unconditional friend, an unconditional friend to everyone, but no one owned him. He belonged to no one. In fact, one time we went to visit him in Assisi. We hadn't seen him for a long time, and I'd been really missing him. And so we got there, and we're going to get to spend time with Swami. But he was really busy. He was in the middle of writing, and he really didn't have much time to give us. And he could tell I was a little bit disappointed. And he came up to me and he said, "Devi, no one is special to me. I'm not even special to myself." And so that was a wonderful training in impersonal friendship, where his love for us was unquestionable. Our love for him was unquestionable. But if we didn't see him, if he didn't relate to us, the love we knew it was there. And so respect comes from an inner detachment and the ability to watch the other person live their life according to their own lights, and not to feel it has anything to do with you, really. It's just to appreciate, just like, you go outside in a beautiful garden or in springtime, and you look at the plants and the trees, everything coming into blossom, and you just think, oh, it's so beautiful. In and of itself, it's so beautiful. It has nothing to do with you. And it's really, if you can work towards that in a marriage, just to appreciate the beauty in the other person, but it doesn't really have anything to do with you. You're just, I'm very grateful that as our marriage has evolved, now 50 years, and we were counting the days to see if we'd make it, and we did.
Yeah, Wednesday it was touch and go.
But just, every day is a gift. And to live that way, don't take anything for granted. Every day is a gift. And that should be true of friendship, of everything, and to see the person standing in God's light, living their life, moving towards the light, and just help them in any way you can.
There's another story with Swami that is pertinent. Devi and I use the line a lot, but one time we had received a very critical letter from someone, and there was a gathering at Swami's house, and we went down and
Christmas Eve party.
Yeah, big party. Devi would be a very bad poker player because she does not have a poker face. Anyway, we came in and Swami glanced.
We decided let's not say anything about anybody to this letter. Let's just go to the party. And Swami took one look and came over and said, "What's wrong?" and Devi said, "Well, we got this letter." And Swami said, "Well, let's go in." So we went in the sunroom, and he said, "Well, what's up?" And Devi said, "Well, we got this letter that was very, very critical of us. And Swami, we don't want to be wrong in what we're doing. If we're doing something wrong, please tell us." And Swami said, "You're doing the very best you can for who you are." And we should have just let it go at that point. But then we said, "Well, what about it? Then is this person wrong for writing such
a critical letter?" And Swami said, "That person is doing the very best that they can for who they are." And then with a little smile, he said, "And I'm doing the very best I can for who I am." And so I say, Devi and I often use that line. We get something that seems like just crazy, and instead of getting all riled up about it, we just say they're doing the very best they can for who they are. And if we can work with relationships in that way, then it really, it's like the oil in relationships, the machinery of relationships. Okay, another question.
Before we go to the next question, I just want to say, for those of you who are in a relationship, or perhaps in the future will enter into a relationship, and you're part of an Ananda community, you know, Ananda is a community, first of all, of consciousness. It's not about buildings. It's not about who lives here. It's not about anything outward. It's about a community of consciousness. And for those of us who live here who are in a relationship or have a friendship, you know, which includes everybody really, just to know that we're part of a wave of consciousness, and if you're having a hard time, just pause and feel the energy around you. Feel the innate harmony and support and love and wisdom and understanding. And we're all doing this together. You know, somebody pointed, oh yeah, well, I won't say who, but they came up to us and they said, this person was in an early stage of a marriage, and they came to us and were talking about all the problems they were having, and we looked at each other and we said, we're having the same problem. Yeah. And we kind of said to each other, you know, there's just one marriage and we all live it. And we think everybody's is different and unique, and well, because they have this, but we all live the same. And in a sense, there's one path to God, and we all live it. We all have our own karma, but it's the same path. And so if you're in a relationship with parents, child, you know, I don't want to just specify only marriage, but just to feel the consciousness of harmony and unity is the ocean that we live in. And just draw on that. It's much bigger than the two of you, honestly. And I think that's what sustains us a lot, is we just feel we're part of a greater reality. And so that's very sustaining. Okay, somebody in the back.
I'll just give a one-liner from, there was a wonderful woman here who passed of cancer, and Maria Warner, Devashi's wife, and she was quite critically ill, and it was at the time that we were living in Los Angeles, but at Thanksgiving time we came up and visited, and we were visiting her for what we thought might be the last time. And as we were getting ready to go back, it didn't turn out. There were a few months longer, and then we were able to be with her at the end. But at this point, we thought this might be the last chance we get to see her. And we were just telling her how much we loved her and appreciated her. She was relatively withdrawn at that time, battling severe brain cancer. And anyway, she listened and she opened her eyes. And,
we were saying, oh, Maria, we love you so much. Your friendship has been so meaningful to us, and we thank you for everything. And she opened her eyes
and said, I love you too. Now get back to work. And it's a very, very good line when there's a dispute. And that's one of the ways to get through difficult times. I love you too. Now let's get back to work. Okay.
We have a little special treat at the end that we want to leave time for, but
we'll make sure there's time.
My question
is...
Oh,
Kamala, okay.
I know that this has been more towards coupled people, but I wanted for you to comment on how it relates to non-coupled people. And I know you have been mentioning it as you go through, but if you could just say a little bit more about all that you're saying as it relates to non-coupled people in their other relationships.
Everything we've said relates also to single people. The laws of behavior are the same, regardless of outward conditions. They're just universal laws. And when you're in a relationship, those laws have to be applied according to the relationship that you're in. But if you're single, they have to be applied according to the circumstances of your life. And so the principles are exactly the same. There's not only one marriage and we all live it, there's one life and we all live it.
And a beautiful example, we have Devarshi and Vasudev here from the monastery near Chandigarh. And those monks have the most beautiful friendship. You can just feel it. And it's inspiring to be around any of them because there's an openness and a shared service and deep respect and deep sadhana that they share together daily. And so it's all the same, really. There isn't a difference. And particularly a spiritual marriage should be based on inner renunciation. And to the extent you can do that, the happier you will be in it. And so there are many beautiful examples throughout Ananda of divine friendship that is uplifting everybody involved.
Okay, last question from Narayan.
I know that years ago you both had a Nadi reading, and I wonder, without sharing overly private information from that reading, something that touched you about your relationship and your relationship with God and how that could help us.
Okay, yeah, we'll share a little bit.
To explain
First of all, a Nadi reading. Many of you have read about Swami's Book of Bhrigu. There are some lineages in India where there are great masters, and Bhrigu was a great master, and from ancient times they had somehow transcended time and space, and I don't know, as part of what they did, they wrote out kind of advice for people who might be far in the future.
Astrological charts.
Yeah, so Bhrigu is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Among sages, I am Bhrigu. And so this is more than 2,000 years ago. And Bhrigu has written out readings that apply to individuals in this age. Swami had a reading from Bhrigu. And we had a reading called a Nadi reading. This is from the line of Sukdev, another ancient Indian sage. And this took place in Bangalore. So we went to this Pandit's house, and he had a big storage room. And all he had was our date of birth, time and date of birth.
And place.
And place. And so he had the astrological configuration. And he went into a storeroom, and there were boxes in there, little wooden boxes. And he came out and he asked a couple of questions. He said, "Do you have 2 brothers and a sister to me?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, then I have the right reading." So he came out with a wooden box, and in that wooden box was a palm leaf that was folded accordion style. So it's about that wide and a folded accordion style.
Actually stitched together.
Yeah, stitched together. And so he pulled it out, and he was reading it, this direction. And it was written in Sanskrit, ancient Sanskrit. Now the palm leaf itself had to be recopied. So when Swami got his Bhrigu reading, he actually wanted to have it tested to be sure that it was ancient, not something that was made up on the spot. So he took it to a scholar in a university, and the scholar tested it.
Carbon data tested.
Yeah. Yeah, he said, oh, this isn't very ancient at all. Said, I don't think it's more than a couple of 100 years old. Well, that was enough old for Swami to say the guy didn't make it up on the spot. Okay, so coming. So that was the Burgu reading, and he came out and he had a reading for both of us. And it was astoundingly accurate. He started out different sections of it. And he started out...
He knew nothing about us.
Knew nothing about us. So among other things, he started out saying, in family, he said, you have a son and he's recently gotten divorced and he has 2 young children and he's worried about them. But everything is going to be fine. And you can reassure him that. I mean, so you say, well, that's quite amazing. What did he say about our relationship? He said, first of all, he said, you have been together for many lifetimes. And you have been together and you have followed the same 3 masters for many lifetimes. Babaji, Yogananda, and Kriyananda. Reading in ancient Sanskrit on some palm leaf. So he said that you've been together for many lifetimes, that in past lifetimes you've been teachers for many lifetimes. In your past lifetime, you mainly wrote, and so in this lifetime, you have to do a lot of lecturing. And therefore, that's been our dharma. He started out reading. He always gives, because we know other people who've had readings, he always gives the purpose of the life. He said the purpose of this life for both of us, the purpose of this life is moksha. So freedom from delusion. Moksha means literally to cut delusion, moksha. And so it's the cutting of delusion. So that's the purpose of this life. And he gave a number of, number of things, but all of them very, very accurate.
And the thing that we went that fall, after 2013, the fall after Swami passed, and, Swami had as his legacy, had appointed Jyotish as the next Dharmacharya, and that was, something, a big job. And so we went to try to get guidance. And this man, again, it was beautiful, because when we first started, he was more, kind of...
Like going to an astrologer that you don't know.
Yeah, and kind of occupied with the, the pages and so forth. But the more he talked, he became more and more illumined. And his eyes were just beautiful.
Shining.
And there was this picture on the wall, a big poster of this, it looked like it could have been thousands of years old, of this man, a Brahmin man, sitting in a loincloth under a banyan tree.
Thread across his...
Yeah, a Brahminical thread, looking at the palm leaves. And I said, is that your lineage? And he said, no, it's my father. And anyway, it was so... But the thing that is... 2 things that are pertinent here is he said, because can we carry forward the work that Swami started? And he said, you will uphold the honor of your guru's work. And we just both burst into tears, because that's all we needed to know. No, we can't be Swami. No, we can't do what he did. But we can uphold the honor of what he started. And so that's what we've tried to do. And anyway, I think those were the main things. There were other little points that were amazingly accurate, but aren't that relevant. But it just made us believe in the veracity of what he was saying, little things about our lives, and that he couldn't have known in any way. But anyway, and then at the end, he thanked us, and he said, thank you. He said, for me, this was a blessing to do this reading. Most people come and they want to know, if they're going to be wealthy.
Will my daughter get married?
Yeah, and he said, but you didn't come with questions. You came just for reassurance.
Yeah, he said you didn't come with questions, you came for reassurance because you already know what your path is and your direction is. Anyway, it was quite an amazing experience. Okay, now
let's conclude.
Conclude, because we have a special treat. Some years ago, there's a beautiful song with a beautiful melody, Shenandoah. And I heard this, and the melody lingered in my mind, but the words aren't particularly uplifting. They're about the love of a man for this young woman. But the melody lingered in my mind, and so much so that I rewrote the words. And so they're going to perform the words of a song to Divine Mother with the melody of Shenandoah.
Oh, Divine Mother, I long to know you.
Fade away, O world of Maya.
Oh, Divine Mother, I long to know you.
Away, I'm bound away into the deep Shushumna. Oh, Divine Mother, I long to see you.
Fade away, oh Gaudy Maya.
O Divine Mother, I long to see you.
Away, I'm bound away through the bright Kustasta. Oh, Divine Mother, I long to hear you. Fade away, oh noise of Maya. Oh, Divine Mother, I long to hear you. Away, I'm bound away into the bliss of
Thank you. That was very touching. Beautiful. Thank you. God bless you.